This is the Maxiao Leadership Podcast.
Command of a warship is simply an amazingly humbling experience. I mean, it looks all pompy and great and prestigious, but the amount of fear that you carry as a warship captain is just quite. I can't describe it other than you just have to learn to live with fear and hope. In transformation and change, strategy is the easier piece. You could actually employ consultants, and there are many good ones around who can help you with strategy and change. Strategy. But change relates to execution, and you cannot employ consultants to execute for you. You have inevitably got to go into this middle core, and you're going to have to deal with real people, not PowerPoint slides and reports and data, and that's all there. But how do you get this already stressed, sandwiched, bewildered middle core to actually start to believe that they can be a bit more confident in the growing ambiguities, complexities, and uncertainties? The more difficult the transformation and change, the greater the need for.
Welcome to the Maxiao Leadership Podcast. My guest today is a luminary in the field of organizational and leadership development who has impacted nearly 20,000 leaders across more than 500 organizations globally. Dr. Karuna Ramathan is founder and CEO of KR Consulting in Singapore. He brings to the conversation over 3 decades of rich experience supporting senior leaders and organizations through difficult transformations, especially in middle manager execution challenges and in value and culture changes. Dr. Ramathan is a former naval warship captain who served as organizational development consultant to the Singapore and Brunei governments. He is a Marshall Goldsmith Global Coach and author of the book Navigating the Seas of Change. Dr. Ramathan will help us explore the essence of leadership in the modern age, especially the critical role of what he calls the middle core in organizations. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Karuna Ramathan.
Thank you, Max.
Good morning, Karuna. Thank you very much for being a guest on our podcast today.
Thank you. I've been so looking forward to this, Max. I mean, it's just an amazing opportunity to be able to share some insights, thoughts, and of course, mistakes made. Inevitably, there will be. And by the way, just call me Karuna. I'm more than happy to take it on the first name. Max, is I'll call you Max.
Excellent. Thank you, Karuna. Really, really a pleasure. So in the intro, I gave a brief overview of your background. Could you please introduce yourself a bit more to our audience and tell us about yourself and maybe something that you might want to share about your upbringing?
No, I'm grateful for a privileged life. It's just privilege, one privilege after the other. Next year would be my 40 years of work, and so I started some way back. As many would identify with me, I do have a background in the Navy. Actually, I was trained in the UK, the Britannia Royal Naval College, that's south of England. And that set me off in what would be a lifetime quest, understanding leadership and leaders and just coming into contact with different people and kind of getting a sense of where the tensions were with myself as I started to then realize that this is really hard work, influencing people. And with that, then I spent a good 19 years in the Navy, of which 11 years was at sea, and 5.5 of those 11 years was in command of 2 warships. And very quickly then, I actually moved on to 10 years in the leadership center that was being set up in the Singapore military, and we pioneered that. Did some interesting experimentation work to shift cultures in the military, talk a bit about that. And then I had 3 very good years in the government, helping to move government leaders through difficult conversations around change and transformation, which was at the time the agenda for the government and still is. in Singapore, I was really privileged to be selected to support the Brunei government in some work, and it was pretty tight, and that got some World Bank recognition, which I'm really proud of. And after that, I actually went into my own to do this work, and this is my 7th year as an independent consultant, and we run, I work together with a small team of committed associates. And we've had the privilege of working with many organizations, leaders, managers, just counting more than 1,000 of them, or more than nearly 24 organizations involved in transformation and change. And so that's been the massive privilege that I've had, to be able to kind of learn continuously with people in the real issues that they deal with. Each time this change mindset motivations come into the picture, which is all too easy to have in an infographic, but Max, it is just amazingly challenging and complex. So that's the Karuna, 39 years.
Yes, thank you for the insight. Then would you say that there was a pivotal moment at some point in your life, something that sparked the interest for leadership and organizational? What was the turning point? What really created that passion in you?
It was when I was 19 years old, when I went to the Britannia Royal Naval College. I mean, after a year of that, you begin to realize it's just you and no one else. Interestingly, I was watching a clip on the BRNC training, which is available on YouTube, and I actually do recognize after 39 years the same exercises, climbing the ropes and doing that every day from Monday to Friday. So that it kind of breaks you down. It formats you in a certain way. That was one of the pivots. I've had 3 pivots. The first pivot was that. The second pivot was coming into contact with this amazing woman that I've married. And luckily, I'm married to her for the last 33 years. And that was just, your life's not just yours, and your life now belongs to another. And basically, that is a leadership exercise to me. A lot of us underestimate that, but our relationships actually strengthen and form at home before they get tested in the office. The third point of it is basically command, and command is simply command of a warship is simply an amazingly humbling experience. I mean, it looks all pompy and great and prestigious, but I mean, the amount of fear that you carry as a warship captain is just quite. I can't describe it other than you just have to learn to live with fear and hope. And so there were 3 pivotal moments, Max.
No, thank you for that. And I think I can relate to the second one that you mentioned with your relationship with your spouse. And as I like to tell people, happy wife, happy life. And,
without a doubt.
Yes, so it's really important to invest into that relationship, because it's the for me, it's the basis of everything else. For the rest of the family, you want to have a close relationship with your children, in that strong relationship with your spouse, and also what you do externally, come from what you do internally. So yeah, really very much to that. And
absolutely.
You talked about your experience in the military and as a warship captain. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Why did you decide to go to the army, and what was it like in the first years?
In this case, it was the Navy. In Singapore, you have compulsory military service. Back then, it was 2.5 years. Now it's 2 years. It is a difficult time, because it's a transition from what you did in school and living a civilian life into a forced re-socialization. And 2.5 years is a long time. And you only have heard a lot about Singapore's successes in the last couple of years, maybe the last 10, 20 years. We were not always middle economy, middle class. I mean, so those of us who started off 40 years ago started off from much lower baselines, and the long and short of it was driven by the need to stand up, to feed and earn money. And the military was then a very compelling, inviting career option, and I chose that. And I'm really, really grateful I did that, because it went on, as it turns out, that the military put me through the university. The military sent me all around the world. The university made me pretty much what I'm in. Basically, the military helped make me who I am today. I mean, it's just something I'm eternally, totally grateful for, those 19 plus 10 years. So the choice was simply economic, nothing more at that point.
Excellent. And what was it like, the leadership in the military, and what did you learn there?
That you are the captain of your soul. You are the master of your destiny. There's no one else whom you should be blaming for things that didn't go your way. And it always comes back to what could I have done better? I mean, who can I choose to be, and what can I have done better? And that for a 19-year-old is quite an awesome, is just an amazing paradigm to be in, to discover yourself every day. That you can if you want to, but it will take time and a lot of pain. I mean, that's simply called discipline, right? So that was actually a very, very big intervention in my life. It snapped me out of. I did not come out of it all fit and keen and super and all that. I actually fell up and down and up and down and up and down. And I do know many of my friends who, actually felt the same way. So this was 1 year of protracted, disciplined physical mental training makes a world of difference in how you choose to see the world after that. So that was exactly an amazing. I do know that these days a lot of people I work with in organizations didn't have that opportunity, and so we need to watch that, because some of us are formatted quite visibly differently, and most of us are formatted as a matter of fact through our lived experiences. That's the majority of the majority of the people I meet these days.
That's quite interesting. And what would you say are the, I'll say, maybe 2 or 3 key points that you took from your military experience into your approach to leadership and organizational excellence, things that you teach now your clients, and all throughout your years as a leadership and organizational coach and consultant?
That's just amazing introspection, because I was just sharing this with someone the other day, and I said that I can't understand the concept of stress. It doesn't sit in my consciousness. So the reason for that is because you formatted very early through understanding yourself to seek to overcome any adversity that might come your way. So I would say the first word I would use is overcome. Our mental model or frame is overcome it, overcome it, overcome it. The other is when we can't overcome it or won't, or it's just difficult to do that, then improvisation. So I learned to improvise very quickly, get around it. So you see a wall, you have 3 options. You try to break the wall down, or you try to climb over the wall, or in my case, improvisation, I mean trying to get around the wall. And that, as in the recent years, I realize is actually the principle of negotiation, the principle of collaboration, looking for areas that we can work together rather than to try to kind of get to why we're different and break each other down. The third is the universal word, which is so much hype today, especially in the post-pandemic era. It's adapt. How are we adapting? So I would say overcome, basically overcome, improvise, adapt. It's quite typically military parlance in a lot of the military colleagues all around the world. They would attest to some of it, but I would just caveat that to say it comes from a disciplined socialization. It's quite privileged to get that kind of training quite early in life, and I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you use the word discipline already, I think 5 times since we started, if my count is right. And I want to dive into a bit more into that, because to me, this is one of the core elements, whether it's organizational, in our personal life. It's not very difficult to know what you need to do. I think, especially in our now, you can Google anything and you can find out anything. You can see example of people doing things that will break it down to you, but not everybody does it. And at the core, sometimes it's a question of discipline. How do you get yourself into repeating one action, even in small steps, again and again, in order to achieve a goal? What's your secrets to discipline? Or maybe before that, what's your definition of discipline? And what's the secrets to develop a discipline in anything?
I need to do this. I will do it. I can do it.
Right.
You see, the amount of distraction that we're facing today, the attentive capacities are winning. It's the internet. It's social media. It's over in this side of the world. It's this huge movement around TikTok. I mean, all that's whatever. It just keeps us going, right? And the challenge is to be able to keep your feet firmly on the ground. This is what I will do. I will get it done. And basically to be able to then sense how much of this is reasonable within the day. And that's something I would, so I have no time for exercise, Max. No, I have the time for exercise. It is an important thing. I have no time for this Zoom meeting. I will make the time for this Zoom meeting because it is important enough. So that is a personal choice. It's I go back to the guidelines that I set myself. It's who do I choose to be? I choose to be this. I'm not going to have dessert this evening because I do not want to have dessert this evening. So it manifests in the little things that we do, but it's the strength of the mind over perhaps in some cases the body, and that's the age with exercise, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm 59 years old. I can still do a 5:30 in the morning slow run. I mean, it just comes naturally after a while where you socialize yourself in. Yeah. So I hope I explained that.
I like what you say, that it's about choosing, the choice of who you want to be. You choose what you want to do. And I think what I was thinking, what you were talking is sometimes there's a challenge about assuming what you want, because we get distracted by what we think other people want us to do, and to have the courage to assume what you want, maybe that's where we fall sometime in short in our discipline. No, this is what I want. It's not I want to do that, but then question yourself, why do you want it? And if you're not clear, maybe then, or if you don't really want it, then it's more difficult for you to discipline yourself in that action.
I think, and as you said earlier in the introduction, thank you for that. I am a Marshall Goldsmith coach. So Marshall Goldsmith has influenced my thinking more recently, quite so seriously, and he says something that's quite useful as well, which I'll share now. We all are faced with choices every day. Some of these choices carry risk. It looks like we might not want to do it, but we can decide to, and if we did it, it would then involve certain effort. Now, I see that as a working frame for discipline. These choices may not be happy choices, but it carries some risk. I would just have to make sure that I put in the effort to get that done because it is important enough. So, and I said about if you are in a relationship at home, some of those choices are not about you. It's about the other person. Just like work, if you are leading a team, some of those choices are not about you. It is about the team. So discipline is becoming. I'm glad you picked up on this one. It's not the army military type discipline. It's the discipline of the mind. It's the ability to focus. It's the ability to pause. It's the ability to pull back and say, hang on, wait a minute. What's really going on here? And that awareness and sensibility becomes increasingly important, especially in the work that we do with our clients, because sometimes, all you need is a sit down and a deep breath and ask what's really going on here and what do we need to become a little better at, and are we committed to doing that? So that might be a kind of a discipline paradigm, Max. I hope I'm making some sense here.
Yes. Can you develop a bit more on that, because that was going to be my next question. One is the discipline of ourselves as an individual, and as a leader of an organization. You need to achieve through others, and you want sometimes to bring change to the organization. You have a vision. How do you then bring that discipline in the organization so that everybody works toward that goal? How do you work it out with your client? And do you have an example that you can share with us?
Oh, totally. We do a lot of that in the more difficult here's some principles though that's worked for us. The more difficult the transformation and change, the greater the need for a collective. And what is this collective? It's simply more and more leaders coming together to actually remove any kinds of misinterpretations or doubts they might have on the anxieties that are inherent in change. And the discipline of agreeing on a common narrative. And that narrative, Max, in the work that we do, and I'm doing one in 2 weeks' time with a client, involves bringing the system in a room and getting, say, 15, 20, 25 leaders to work their understanding together and hopefully land on, say, a shared vision of a why. a few key whats, and perhaps one or two by whens. And that allows for a common reference. And if we can agree by the end of the day or the end of 2 days that this is going to hold us up for the next 6 to 12 months, it is a disciplined frame of agreeing that this is what we will lead together. So this is change leadership, because the people who are going to actually do the work, and that's the middle core. We'll come to that in a bit, I'm sure. The middle core will look up to see whether this is worth doing. And if there are enough people of leader importance in the organization who actually can demonstrate that we're all on the same page, this is a disciplined way to look at difficult change. It's worked for us in a few ways, and then one.
Right. Yeah, I see that. So it's rely on the middle core, you said. What is the middle core?
I can't remember who coined the phrase now, but there's this middle manager, frozen middle. I mean, it's quite popular. If we Google it, we'll see it. A frozen middle is simply a phenomenon in organizational development, which explains why resistance is in the middle of the organization, and it comes from middle managers. Middle managers are people who fill your sandwich, like Simon Sinek says. He's coming from the top, you're going to deal with the bottom. But my associates and I, we are starting to look at the middle manager as an expanded pool of people. And let me explain, not just managers in appointments anymore, but you now have project managers, you have team leaders, you have supervisors, you have individuals dealing with vendors, you have stakeholders, you have partnerships that are quite common in organizational life these days. And basically what's happening there is the reality that, again, this was a conversation just as lunch today with an old friend. I said that, remember when we actually got into the workforce after, say, our first degree or university education or polytechnic diploma, we might expect to have 6 to 9 months to find our feet. We might expect to have a guiding manager, a mentor of sorts, a supervisor who would closely watch us, going to him or her for checks on, hey, what, is this right? Is that right? And maybe attending some training courses, maybe getting into some extended induction programs, maybe doing some site visits. Max, I mean, this side of the world, all that's now moot. You might not have a young person who's 24 years old, might not even have 6 to 9 weeks because of the nature of the change work that's already inherent, because it's forced change and not planned change. Organizations are grappling with the intensity of change. And so you find that this young person is now the middle core. 6 to 9 weeks in an organization and having to deal with a whole lot of issues and different people and not quite in the work group. So we estimate that 30, maybe 40% of an organization typically is the middle core. If you take the 3 to 5% that are top leaders, the rest of it under them are the middle core. They have responsibility for work, and that responsibility for work involves the need to influence people. So in transformation and change, strategy is the easier piece. You could actually employ consultants, and there are many good ones around who can help you with strategy and change, strategy. But change relates to execution, and you cannot employ consultants to execute for you. You have inevitably got to go into this middle core, and you're going to have to deal with real people, not PowerPoint slides and reports and data, and that's all there. But how do you get this already stressed, sandwiched, bewildered middle core to actually start to believe that they can be a bit more confident in the growing ambiguities, complexities, and uncertainties? So there's a lot going on here. And so our work takes us into the middle core, which is where the big bang for the buck has to be. Now, Max, ironically, this is also the group that's not going to get leadership training, right? And you can't expand your training budget by 3 times. So that's really a bit of a dilemma that most organizations are facing now. And they're going to have to fix that really quickly. If not, it directly relates to the change success. So I've said quite a few things here. I hope this makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So you've got this, I'll say, big pool of individuals within the organizations who find themselves in the middle. You have the top leaders at the top, but everybody is a leader in the organization. But you have that group of top leaders who set the direction. This is what we want to do. And you have the people who are doing the work, the frontline employee, and those people in the middle need to really make things happen. And they have to deal with, most of the time, there are changes that you go self instigated change, the thing that they want to do in their own area, but they have to deal a lot of the time with imposed change that come from above that they need to implement. They might not always agree with it, but that's their role to make it happen. And sometimes they discover that the change is happening last minute, not having contributed into it. So what's your recipe for engaging that middle core? How do you take clients through? What are the steps to really have the change happen with the middle core?
It's quite surprising to me and my colleagues over the last few years to realize just how many people who work in the middle of the organizations undervalue their influence. Of course, this might sound rude, but leaders in the upper levels of the organization overestimate their influence. The power, and many good researchers have pulled this out, the power inherent in position forces people to work with leaders. And that's just for a whole host of reasons. And when an organization does not have a transformation agenda and the organization is trying to be efficient, it's like the military, I mean, everyone just follow, okay, and make sure you follow so that you don't get into trouble, and that's fine, okay. But when you have a transformation agenda and the middle core is now directly involved in the execution of difficult, new, and not clear work, then the issue becomes, how do we help them realize how they're underestimating their influence people to people and help them then build that up. Okay, this is the working definition of leadership, because leadership is a process of influence. Leaders are positions. Of course, we assume that leaders have leadership, but a lot of the middle core don't see themselves as leaders. Well, they're not paid enough. They are very narrowly defined. They come to work and they've got KPIs. And so there's a natural, I don't see myself doing this piece, because, Max, and performance management in organizations, I'm sure it's there at your side of the world as well, compounds this problem, because to the large formats around performance management, the dominant formats are individual reward. So basically, it's what have you done for the whole year? What have you done? Not what has your team done have the whole year. So the default that we have built over the years is success for the middle core, at least, is largely determined by what I, the manager, or I, the project manager, can prove as what I did. So you have transformation and change that kind of throws this out of whack a little bit, because, I mean, there's so many things you need me to do. Let me just default back to the ones that I'm most comfortable with. I'm not doing the rest. Some call this resistance, some call it covert resistance, whatever the case might be. But the way to open it, to answer the question, is to be expansive, to actually help the middle core or the middle manager, the project lead, contemplate about how much he or she can actually stretch. That's a leadership act. And to get there, we do a range of things, as many consultants would, and many organizations are. But the hard work is to building the middle core into leadership skill sets. Now, different organizations have different leadership skill sets. They have different leadership competencies, but these are really very important. Right now they are, because there needs to be a coherent way for the organization to signal to its 30 or 40% that to be successful in this organization involves you executing these pieces of work that is going to be uncomfortable in the near term. And it is based on these things. I'll give an example. Managers need to communicate. But influence means you communicate to influence. The test of a manager in a transformation is whether he or she can actually work cross-functionally. whether he or she can actually become confident working with people that they instinctively may not like. Maybe when he or she needs to work with someone who does not want to work with him, and that's all him or her, you know. So those are the kinds of work we do on the ground, and it's met with amazing success. I mean, I'm proud of what we have accomplished. I was just gonna go to LinkedIn and say, you know, we don't publicize our work. Our work is referral in this, but we do believe that the hundreds and thousands, it's gone past the 1,000 mark in the last couple of years for this adaptive team leader work that we do and change leader work that we do. It has actually met with kind of significant successes to see actually projects moving and people actually coming up and saying, you know, I'm more confident dealing with complexity. So it is about influence. It is about how you're underestimating your influence. And basically it's about, that's not so much about the KPIs in the work. It's about how you actually strengthen your links to people so that you get data, information, and wisdom much faster than others. This is like, it's universal to me. If you're cooped up looking at your laptop, you're not going to get very far, unfortunately.
No, that's interesting. So it's start with raising the awareness at the top of the organization of the importance of that middle core, but it's also in the middle core themselves realizing the power that they have around the organization and developing leadership skills. And I like your definition of leadership because that's the one that I also give all the time. For me, leadership is about influence. It's how you influence others in taking action towards a common goal. And so you need to develop some capabilities for that leadership. What would you say are the core leadership capabilities? What will be your definitions? What do you focus on for that middle core? What are the core capabilities that you need to develop?
Well, this one is a bit situational. So we get a little technical in this. Is when we consult on this, we believe there are no universal pieces. I mean, I'm coming dangerously close to upsetting people here, but in the last 1-2 years, empathy has been a major ask. And that is if in the absence of anything else, there needs to be some effort to practice empathy. So I would say that empathy is a major leadership practice today. As to whether that actually directly relates to transformation outcomes, and when we work with organizations, we're always keeping our eye on the results and outcomes that we want to see, because measurement is a big part of the work we do. And we are known in this side of the world for our ability to measure and measure it quite so seriously. There needs to be a situational or contextual framing upfront as to what some of these skills may be. And there are very good universal references for this. McKinsey, I think about 3 years ago, came up with deltas, you know, skills with attitudes. And there's like a whole series of, I think they had about 30 or 35 of these leadership competencies or skills. But not all of them are applicable in an organization, especially if there is a concerted effort. And we guide these conversations. We pull leaders in the room and say, hey, wait a minute. I mean, if you're going to be transforming the next 3 to 5 years, how do you see your people becoming, you know? And we want them to do this. We want them to do that. We want them to do this. So adaptability is a big ask. Data fluency is a big ask. There's a bit of self-leadership drive, resilience that is a big ask. There's a bit of critical thinking, in some of the cases, critical thinking. So I'm just rattling these off based on the work that we do. But there is another level of intervention, Max, which becomes very important, because you take the middle core and they are not going to go through, ironically, these are the busiest people in an organization. They are not going to sit through a leadership program, you know. They're going to be on their phones and laptops and iPads, and they will worry about what's going on with the team. So we're going to have to think about how we give them the opportunity to change what they believe would make them successful in their specific situations that they are in. So it then introduces variables like, what's my team? What is the work that we're doing? What is the most challenging project? What am I coming up short over and over again? What is what is the one thing I can do in the next 6 to 12 months that will increase my chances of success? So that goes back to the success mindset, which plays up with a lot of us at work. It is universal. We go to work, most of us, we go to work so that something is enabled in our lives. I mean, basically, there's an economic view to this. Success then is defined by how well we do the work. We get a sense of fulfillment, of course. We are really proud when we're doing really good at work. But it boils down to success. For some of us, that tweaks into happiness as well. But that's a whole podcast by itself. Okay. But the point here is we activate the success mindset of most middle managers to help them to make informed choice as to what is the one, maybe two things out of this list of, say, 10 to 12, 15 things that applies directly to the situation I'm in the projects that I'm having to work, the team members I need to deal with, that will increase my influence towards success. That's as bland as it gets.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the middle change, we talked a lot about the middle core. We talked a lot about changes and having to navigate, the need to raise awareness. You wrote a book about navigating the seas of changes. Can you tell us a bit more what made you write this book and what are the core message from the book?
I have very strong and fond memories of the 19 years I spent in the Navy. I would have liked to have spent a few more years in the Navy, but I made a conscious choice to get off the ship because my children, my daughter was 9 years old then, and my son was 6 years old. And being away at sea had already cost my wife her career options, and she stopped working. And I thought it was only right to step off the ship. So, but my memories of the Navy is extremely fond, and it brings smiles. So I thought that it would be good to encapsulate some of the lessons I had learned over the 19 years in a short little kind of a tight little book, and it's only 90 pages. And then bring that on to bear, because as I pondered over it, Max, I realized that the sea is actually a lesson in complexity. I mean, basically everything that I've been prepared to do was to deal with complexity and uncertainty. A ship is safe in harbor. It's all tied up alongside, but the moment it puts to sea, you need to be ready to overcome, improvise, and adapt to anything, right? So I thought that it would be a great idea to build a leadership text around the experiences I'd had and the work that I was doing. And it's a very precise little book that we give out, so that there are chapters on, say, how to lead teams, how to deal with change, how to work a narrative, what are the things you need to look out for when new people join you, what is the problem with leadership, as well as the promise of leadership. So it is not a theoretical text, more a reflective one as to what the seed offered me and how I saw things, and how I believe some of these constructs are really important. So that moved me to write the book, to kind of to deal with the first 20 years of my life and pull it together. And it was an amazing experience. I'm happy to report that.
No, that's very interesting. It's quite interesting that some of the metaphor that you use are very close to how I see leadership as well. You talked about being the captain of your own ship, and I use also that metaphor a lot. You could be in the ship, and while in the ship, you can be either passenger or you can be the captain. And as an individual and also as an organization, the question is, am I a mere passenger in somebody else's ship, or am I taking the lead? Am I steering the wheel? What is it I'm doing really to get things moving? And I think it's important to ask ourselves regularly the question. And once you are at sea, you don't know what's going to happen, but the captain trusts his training, and he knows that he will be able to deal with the winds, the waves, and everything else, because he's prepared to approach that.
One of the most difficult things to come to terms with when we get into this ship and sea metaphors is to imagine, as I had to deal with it quite early in life, just how difficult it would be as the captain to go to bed at night in the middle of an ocean in a storm. And storms don't last for 6 hours max. I mean, they last for 3 days. And ships don't, unlike airlines, they can't. I mean, you can't break through the turbulence by increasing your speed. On a ship, because of the fuel curves and the fuel costs, you have to maintain a certain speed through a storm. I mean, you see that on YouTube clips and all that, right? So some of these, I mean, we've been through some high storms, high waters. And so the ability to actually get some shut-eye is actually quite frightening, because that is the working definition of trust, that you would go to sleep knowing that your team, your crew, would actually be able to keep you out of harm's way. And that is so humbling, when you get to demonstrate that trust and the belief in people. Now, a lot of organizations, I mean, it's in my book, a lot of organizations could do a little better with that, because we talk about having to build trust, but I'm not so sure that the leader is very clear about what example that would take to demonstrate to people that they can be empowered. We believe in you. You should believe in yourself, because you've got this. I mean, have you got it? I'm going to bed now. So that's the kind of a little bit of the work that we do with our clients now. I mean, it's quite powerful, but it's very basic. It hits you at the gut.
It does indeed. And I don't think many people listening to this will realize that at sea, the storm lasts 3 days. Because now we've got this picture that is a few hours and it's gone, or there'll be probably more people traveling by air than by sea. So they've got the experience of the turbulence that lasts a few minutes. But if you're going to be in a storm for 3 days, and organizations have to go through storms for months, then you need to make sure, because as a leader, you need the rest time to keep your energy. So you need to have a team who can manage these throughout the time, because if everybody goes to sleep, then you know what will happen. So I mean, you need to build a team around you who can really navigate the storm. So what's the secret for that? How does that work?
Yeah,
how does that work at sea, and how does that work in organization?
At all warships around the world, the structure of naval work is that you can't put to sea until you've been assessed, you have been inspected, your training has been certified. So we get a bit lucky at that, because there's a system for determining, say, your ability to deal with an unfortunate fire or a safety issue, or you keep the ship away from, basically don't hit. I mean, you're not going to hit a rock, So there are standards that are quite explicit. Now, in organizations, there are some similarities in terms of processes and protocols and procedures. I mean, the standard operating procedure, procedures. But what we find quite disconcerting, and I'm sure this is also universal, is a lot of managers tend to look down and look up and look down and look up, and they don't look across. And when complexity happens, the same pattern of behavior occurs, and most people then are either micromanaging subconsciously, or they are determined to actually meet a KPI. And okay, I use this. Leaders are at real risk of producing, because that's results. Successful leaders got to where they were in most organizations because they are reliable, they are loyal, they are actually people who produce results. They are capable. So capable, you produce results. But leaders in these conditions over the last 2 to 3 years, particularly in transformation work that we do, are at real risk of producing and reducing people. So the sentiment around the world generally is increasingly becoming, I am not really happy at work because of the way I'm treated. Now, you don't get that on a ship. You do not get that on a ship because of the very humbling thought that the most important person, and I didn't say this, someone actually said it, it's been said several times, the most important person on a warship is actually the least educated person, probably, who is called the chef. And the chef holds the key to the morale of everyone on board the ship, as well as holds the key to keeping the food safe so that you don't down everyone down and drop the operational capability of the ship. So a lot of this is not in the consciousness of leaders. We believe that we are leaders and the rest of people are not, and they're just there to do the work. But how do you then transfer not just responsibility, but some degree of accountability to individuals? And the word is not delegation, as I was saying to a client a couple of weeks ago. Delegation is has been there for the longest time. Delegation is a manager's skill, but a leader's skill is empowerment. So how do you toggle between delegation and empowerment? How do you move between value and results instead of just results? How do you give people the self-belief that they can actually make a difference in the spaces that they are in? Not the 400 or 500 people in an organization, but the 3 or 4 people who actually look to them for work. And so that's what we try to do. And that's actually quite, I mean, those lessons I learned from the ship. I mean, as the ship captain, I would be quite blatantly and loudly proclaiming that I didn't know anything that was happening on the ship. I mean, how do you get to know what's going on in an engine room? How do you get to know what's going on in operations center? How do you know how to deal with a helicopter that comes? You have a vague understanding of it. You know what the SOPs and the limits are. You know what the safety procedures are, but you are not the operator. You're going to have to default to the operator. I think it's pretty much maxed that in teams as well these days. I mean, can we sit back, hold ourselves back, not be so advocative and bother to practice some inquiry out of respect for the wisdom or the information or the knowledge that someone sitting in the corner of the room might have. And you know, consultants like us have to unpack that quite a bit. But that's really where this is. And it is just a function of the growing complexity and uncertainty. So the metaphor we use is to see. You can't draw lines on water. You cannot do PowerPoints on water. Basically, you just have to go in a certain direction and keep adjusting, improvising, adapting, and coping as you do.
Excellent. No, that's already powerful. And Karuna, we're getting the last section of our conversation here. I wish we could go on forever. What would you say? You know, we talked a lot about your career as a ship captain and your work as a consultant. When you look at the trends of leadership these days, you know, we talk about change, we talk about empathy. How would you summarize the 3 advice that you'll give leaders, summarizing advice to the leaders that are relevant today? What 3 things they should focus on?
I've had this several times asked of me, and I've been carrying this message around quite a bit. So the fundamental thing that people expect from their leaders is demonstrated humility. It allows people to feel safer around leaders. So the opposite of humility is arrogance, and that's not going to cut with anyone. It is a subconscious shutdown. So humility is something that needs to be consistently demonstrated. But to demonstrate humility, a leadership practice that is useful in today's context is empathy. So actually, empathy gets you humility, because you might be described as someone with some level of humility. If you, as Barack Obama would say, empathy is simply the ability or the work towards you do to start to think like the other, start to act like the other, wonder what, how, and how the other is feeling, you know. So that actually, so empathy. So the first point is humility. The second point is empathy driving into that behavior set called humility. But the underpinning piece on empathy, so that authenticity is not compromised, is the belief that respect for all is fundamental to leadership success. So it is the word respect. Basically, most of us all around the world, Max, have been brought up well enough to understand this. Please, there's only room for one conscious thing. Am I being respectful? If I'm being respectful, empathy as a practice might come a little easier. And if I'm consistent with the practice of empathy, then I might be described from time to time as someone who has some degree of humility. So it's a long-winded way, but I will caution here: respect is 1 or 0. So there's no scale of 0 to 10. I mean, it's just the moment someone deems you as disrespectful, it's over. You have lost your ability to influence the person. So it's respect, empathy, humility, Max.
Excellent. No, thank you for that. And I learned a lot through readings, and I believe in the quote that the leaders are readers. So I've got a series of books curated from guests who have been in this podcast, and they recommend books that have influenced them. What would you say are 3 books that you recommend to our audience, and why?
Wow. I mean, at one stage I had 900 books in my bookcase. It's dwindled down to 400. So I love to read, right? I mean, the hardcover books especially. But okay, here goes. The first one that we give to senior leaders is a Harvard book out of Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky. It's quite a popular book, Leadership on the Line. It's a 2017 book. It's just an amazing it's an amazing projection of what leaders do and what leaders don't do and why leaders struggle with the things they do. And I find that very useful for senior leaders. For example, there's a chapter there on Manage Your Hungers, the difference between vision and ambition. It's just an amazing read. It's quite popular in the leadership circles, especially when we work with senior leaders. The second book is something that I'm increasingly starting to offer to more mature leaders and managers that I meet. Here are people who are in their 50s and 60s who might be struggling a little with that balance between success and happiness. As we all know, different phases of life, we go through that. So for that, I love the Marshall book. I mean, Marshall is such a great mentor, Marshall Goldsmith. And this one that he has had, I think it's his 4th bestseller, New York Times bestseller, is the one on the earned life. So the earned life actually helps to kind of put us in consciousness between our regrets and our fulfillment and all those concepts that are actually polarizations of how we totally feel, and it kind of brings that to life. And I have had many grateful people say, thank you for this. Okay. Yeah. The third book is a more technical book. And here are people, consultants alike, readers or your listeners who might actually want to learn a little bit more about the kind of work we do. So I'm a Dialogic OD consultant, organizational development consultant, which means I fully celebrate the principle of emergence, which means we let reality emerge from the collective. And so I don't use survey data as much as other consultants do. So for that, my guiding book has been Covert Processes in Organizations. I think the book was written in 2009 by Robert Marshak. It sets out 6 covert processes like mindsets and mental models and all that, which I think is fascinating reading, particularly in these trying times that organizations and leaders find themselves in, Max. So these are my 3 go-to books at this point.
Excellent, great. That's I'm going to dive into them, especially one on the processes. I think that there's a lot around process that are underestimated in organization, probably because we don't think enough about the people, and they're all linked. But when you put a collective of people together, then you need to define how they're going to work together, and that's where process become important. Great. Now, as we get to the end of this interview, there's one question that I like to ask all the guests on the podcast, which is, what is one question that you wish I'll ask you today? We discussed a lot, but maybe there was one question that you wish I'd ask you, I didn't ask, and how would you have answered it?
That's a tough one. I mean, the one question that you might have asked is perhaps if I was not doing this work, what would I find myself doing? That would have been a really tricky question for me, because it's like I've kind of been reintroduced to the Japanese frame Ikigai, and so Ikigai, you find your purpose through the work you love to do and you get paid for it. And I'm really, really fortunate that I'm in that state now. So I cannot. Luckily, you did not ask me that question. If you're not doing this, what else would you do? Because I cannot for the world of me, Max, think of something else right now.
Oh, great. So that's a question. So the answer is yes, nothing else you would be doing.
Nothing.
Excellent. No, it's interesting that I read recently that the good thing about growing old is that you get to learn what you like and what you are good at. And if you can do both at the same time, that's wonderful. So I keep asking myself every year now, do I know better what I like? Am I more conscious about what I'm good at? And how do I pivot and start to focus solely on those 2?
Excellent questions. I'm going to take a bit of that for myself this evening.
Excellent. No, thank you very much, Kavanaugh. It was really great conversations.
No,
Anything else, any final word, any final comment before we conclude?
to your listeners out there, I'm more than happy to talk to them and help them. Should they have a question,
Excellent.
you can reach out. I'm sure your notes would have how to reach me. But I'm
Excellent.
more than happy to cast some light and give my perspective to like-minded people who actually want to make a conscious effort to choose to be a better version of themselves.
Thank you very much. And thank you for all the wisdom that you shared with us today.
Thank you, Max. The pleasure's been mine.
This was the Maxiao Leadership Podcast. Thank you for joining us. To listen to future episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Until next time, keep being the leader everybody trusts and respects.